So far in this series, I've made a lot of episodes going over characters in Smash Ultimate who were considered as high or top tier by the player base yet failed to either maintain a strong presence in the meta or garner a sustainable following in the first place. Despite each of them having very strong tools and attributes that would make them appealing to try out, empirical data would suggest that theoretical capabilities hold less water than one would expect. In general, each of them still have a decent casual following even if they may not have much representation in the competitive scene. And while there still are plenty of other good but not actually fighters I can go over, I want to make an episode on someone more aligned with Piranha Plant because I spent enough time in the high and top tier section for now. So in today's episode, I want to go over arguably one of the most interesting characters in Smash Ultimate even to this day, Rosalina and Luma. I'm just gonna call her Rosa to keep it simple. No offense to Lumas, I love them, but that's a long name to repeat throughout the video. For the Rosa mains out there, if there are any besides the buzz, I'd like to clear up that this video is not meant to be a personal attack against you or your main. The goal of Why No One Plays is to analyze and discuss why some characters are less popular than others by breaking down their playstyle, attributes, and properties to see where the disconnection might be. In doing so, I hope that some of you might feel interested in giving them a try, so let's not waste any more time and get right into it. As I'm sure many of us can agree on, Super Mario Galaxy was a big contributor to why the Nintendo Wii was such a commercial hit, among a plethora of other fantastic titles. Both installments, Galaxy 1 and Galaxy 2, displayed to us a multitude of ways the Wiimote can be used to enhance our gameplay experience, as well as the vastly improved graphical limits of the Wii. Suffice to say, it was a successor that lived up to the already high expectations created by the 3D Mario titles preceding it, being Super Mario Sunshine and 64. The deuteragonist of the Galaxy series is, of course, Rosalina, and by extension, her army of starry Lumas, being a mainstay in the greater Mario franchise ever since their introduction back in 2007. With Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS and Wii U being scheduled for release in 2014, several newcomers were added to expand the roster, one of which being the starry duo. In spite of her canonical power and influence, Rosalina was never playable in her game of origin, instead serving as an NPC within the Comet Observatory that would guide Mario throughout his adventure. But while there was no primary source material to reference from, that also meant there was nothing constraining the development team, which presented an opportunity for them to be as ambitious as they wanted to be in conceptualizing their moveset. However, with unlimited freedom comes the risk of overextending, and that's sort of what happened to them in Smash 4. Many iterations of the franchise's previous iteration can remember the sheer zoning pressure Rosa could exert on her opponents with the help of her trusty Lumas. Thanks to her ability to remotely position Luma, who synchronizes their attacks with hers, she was essentially Smash's first ever legitimate puppet master fighter, or rather she still is, that is unless you consider Olimar or Ice Climbers to have remote control of their quote-unquote partners. Her opponent had to more or less fight two people at the same time, and like Ice Climbers, the strength of her attacks would be significantly magnified if both her and Luma's hits connected on the same target. Much of Rosa's Smash 4 career saw her firmly placed in the top 5 of most tier lists, at least prior to the tumultuous advent of Cloud and Bayonetta. However, similarly to those two as well as most other top tiers in 4, Rosa was heavily nerfed during her transition to Ultimate. Luma's deceptively high durability has been lessened to a point where they're much easier to get rid of compared to before, and their offensive pressure has been reduced to be less oppressive to deal with as a whole. Additionally, Rosa herself lost a lot of what made her strong to begin with, such as her decreased zone control not only due to the game's overall increased tempo, but the weaker spacing potential of her and Luma's moves, either through laggier frame data or shorter range. Now would probably be a good time to explain what the two's playstyle is about. As stated before, she plays like a puppet master, using Luma to extend her effective range and pressure enemies from afar. Unlike Ice Climbers and Olimar though, she can maintain Luma's position at any spot on the map, creating an endless amount of ways to attack her opponent and thus an unpredictable neutral. Dealing 40% in damage to Luma or sending them off stage will KO them, upon which a new one respawns after 10 seconds, and since Luma functions as a separate entity, the player is able to input commands even if Rosa herself is unable to act on them, such as while stunned, asleep, grabbed, or even while in hit stun. While not to the same egregious extent as in Smash 4, Luma is for all intents and purposes a disjoint for Rosa, albeit a living sentient disjoint, which begs the question if this would be considered celestial abuse, but I think that falls outside of Peter's jurisdiction, so we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. This combined with her tall stature, lightweight, and floaty nature gives off the impression that close quarters combat is not her forte even with Luma, but the ability for the latter to fight autonomously implies that standard melee engagements may not be as simple with them, at least in comparison to other straightforward fighters like Captain Falcon, Roy, and Fox. Even so, keep away and trapping is the name of the game for these two, using Luma's disjointed range to your advantage by strengthening your attacks while together and zoning opponents away while separate before searching for an opening to close out the stock safely. Lack of endurance for both of them forces you to approach a match with delicate patience, since trading blows results in a net loss for you most of the time. Fortunately, Rosa's various traits grant her arguably some of the best defensive neutral in the entire game. I already went over how her attack range can span the entire stage on paper thanks to Luma, providing her with a lot of risk-free damage. Starbits cause Luma to launch a trio of starbits in a cone. While the attack itself does average damage and has no knockback, it's a penetrating projectile, which means you can't challenge it with an active hitbox. Gravitational pull makes them immune to most projectiles and switches ownership of any held item to her, such as Rob's gyro or Diddy Kong's banana. In totality, her special moves, though situational, can accommodate situations most other characters have no answer to, making her surprisingly confounding to go up against. At this point, if you didn't already have an opinion on it before, you can probably hypothesize a few reasons for why the two don't exactly scream pick me for most players. The core experience of playing Rosa is already very niche. Puppet Masters, though a rare archetype, are present in a wide range of titles, single and multiplayer alike. And while their unconventional tools make for very interesting and multi-layered gameplay, the inherent onus of having to essentially micromanage two independent units creates a skill floor that automatically turns away many people, bringing us to the first and most obvious reason why no one plays Rosalina and Luma. They are impossible to play for a lot of people. Let me explain. In competitive video games, it's extremely rare for someone to be able to compartmentalize multiple factors while performing at an optimal level. The more things you have to think about at any given time, the longer it takes for you to mentally respond to stimuli because all of those factors have to update in accordance to changes in your environment. In other words, the less things you have to think about, the faster you can react. And in a game like Smash Bros, responding even a quarter second faster means all the difference between victory or defeat. I'm not trying to imply that gamers are stupid, quite the opposite. Professional gamers are fantastic at processing and registering the ebb and flow of a match a lot faster than most professional athletes because more of an emphasis is placed on mental response over physical in esports than in traditional sports like soccer, basketball, tennis, etc. All we're doing is pressing buttons on a controller or a keyboard and tilting the control stick or moving the mouse. Pushing this level of focus to the absolute limits of human capability demands that you think of nothing but the action that needs to be done.
Charges in, doesn't check. Oh, what? Oh my god! Inhuman reactions!
Don't believe me? Try it for yourself. Go on one of those online reflex tests and take it with nothing else happening around you. Then take it again while listening to loud music or having a conversation with someone. Then take it again while knocking on your desk repeatedly while the music's playing or while you're talking with someone. The more stuff that enters your consciousness, the slower you think. Smash already involves thinking about a lot of minute elements in a match. On screen it may not look like a whole lot is happening, but if you can see what's going on in the minds of pro players, they are continuously sorting through a torrent of information. The last thing a player wants is more stuff to have to think about, and no character imposes this more than Rosa. Without stroking the Buzz's ego too much, since I know he's gonna see this eventually, hi Sam if you're watching, hardly anyone walking this earth has the capacity to play at a high level while accounting for all these things. Now, you might be wondering why I went through all the trouble to lecture you on compartmentalization when I could have just said she was hard to play like Sheik, Joker, or Shulk, but they're not hard in the same way. From a mechanical standpoint, Rosalina and Luma are easy to play. You don't have to string 40 different attacks together with precise input like Sheik, nor do you have to understand the limits of 6 individual characters like Shulk. Rosa's difficulty stems from the need to simultaneously process multiple things at once, which is far more difficult to improve on by virtue of natural human limitation. Let's make an analogy. I'm guessing most of you know basic computer stuff. You have the processor, also known as the CPU, and the RAM. Think of the CPU as the working speed, how fast and efficiently you can accomplish a task. The RAM is the workspace, how many things you can do at the same time. Naturally, in order to have a powerful computer, you need an equal balance of both. You can have the fastest processor in the world, but if it's only receiving one task at a time, there's a hard limit to its productivity. Conversely, you can have a million things laid out, but if your CPU is slow, it's gonna take forever to finish all of them. Going back to the player, it's far easier to increase the processing speed of your brain than it is to increase the immediate memory capacity. That's why 90% of people are terrible at multitasking. Joker, Sheik, and Shulk are difficult for how much processing speed they require, whereas Rosalina and Luma are difficult for how much memory capacity they require. Make sense? Once again, I'm not saying that no one plays them because they're too stupid to. I'm saying that Rosa is too inaccessible due to the type of mental strain she imposes being incompatible for many players. That doesn't mean those who can multitask very well are smarter than others. Both sides have their advantages and disadvantages. It's just that a lot more people can increase the CPU more easily than their RAM, so to speak. Having said all of that, complexity is not the only thing hurting her representation. Pragmatically, Rosa has two very fatal flaws that make things a lot harder for her to find success in Ultimate. First, her matchups. Prevailing wisdom knows that Smash Ultimate's meta is vastly different from many of its predecessors. While not as precise or sharp as Melee, Ultimate's pace and physics are a lot faster than Smash 4, greatly indirectly buffing fighters with higher tempo in the process. Zoners and campers are still effective, mind you, but the top dogs, especially the popular ones, have some combination of range and speed. It's partly the reason why Mart, the character I plan to make a piece on in the future, is less favored over Lucina, despite in the previous entry he was seen as better than her in almost every way. Why this matters for Rosa is that one of the dominating archetypes in Ultimate is the sword fighter class. Much of her effective attack range is dependent on Luma face tanking hits for her, as she has little to no intangibility on most of her attacks. For example, her forward tilt and down tilt have seemingly long range given that she attacks with a tall frame, but in doing so she extends her hurt box forward as well, making her vulnerable to damage herself. Sword fighters like Cloud, Roy, and Aegis are popular on account of their attacks having long range without exposing their hurt boxes. So in head-to-head combat, if they were to exchange blows, a Swordie's attack would break through Rose's attack more often than not. Luma doesn't mitigate this that much either. Even with their extended range, Luma also lacks disjoints, so over the course of a fight, both of them will lose out on traits, further exacerbated by their poor survivability, both of them. I tend to imagine Luma as our Sen who dies a lot faster in exchange for respawning a lot more frequently. This was a point of weakness for her back in Smash 4, but it's more pronounced now in light of the nerfs to Luma. Any attack that deals like 10% damage or more is enough to send them into tumble, and if you fling them off stage, they die regardless of how much health they have left. So against mid-range fighters like the aforementioned Swordies, her main advantage is rendered null and void. Second, her blind spot. Rose's zone control makes her a very dangerous opponent, but she can be exploited by the fact that, like most puppet masters, her pressure diminishes considerably without Luma by her side. So if she throws Luma away from her or loses Luma altogether, she goes from a respectable high tier to like bottom 5 in all honesty. Zoners and long-range fighters are so effective in this game for the simple reason that most projectiles travel in a linear fashion, thus actively covering the entire space from where they are to where they end up. If Samus fired a full power charge shot from the ground, it basically covers the entire span of Final Destination. On the other hand, Luma can only occupy a small section of the map. Sure, Rosa can recall them, but you get what I mean. Their threat bubble doesn't span as far as a typical projectile. Any fighter with fast gap closing and either a strong combo game or disjointed range will be able to bypass Luma as soon as Rosa throws them out, which leaves her wide open, and she can't summon Luma back while in hit stun. In essence, while she can extend her sword to anywhere on the stage, she has to forfeit her shield along with it. Also, speaking of disadvantage, Rosa lacks any means to disengage close quarters pressure, as she has no reliable out of shield option besides up smash, which can only attack in front of her. Additionally, her slow falling in airspeed makes her very easy to juggle for anyone with strong aerial coverage, like once again, Swordies. If memory serves, Roy and Chrom are her two worst matchups because they have the perfect combination of speed, range, kill pressure, and combos to all but invalidate her entire existence. Now, a considerable amount of Rose's nerfs were more or less reverted through balance patches, but while they were substantial enough to alleviate much of her weak points with how bad of a first impression Ultimate's rendition had on the community, these buffs fell on deaf ears. Generally speaking, first impressions are lasting impressions. It's rare for a once unpopular fighter to magically become popular even if they received a mountain of buffs to improve their gameplay. Granted, there are exceptions, but if you were to look at representation from back in version 1.0 to now, the landscape didn't change all too much. Though there is a bright spot. Lately, DeBuzz has been showcasing that Rose's improved capabilities in recent tournaments might be enough to inspire people to try it out. And credit where credit is due, she's actually a fantastic answer for a lot of anti-meta characters, most notably Game & Watch and Sonic, who are difficult for a lot of players to handle. Unfortunately, Steve isn't part of that list, but then again, I don't think anyone counters that guy. Anyways, let me know what your thoughts are on Rosalina and Luma in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with my points. And to all the Rosa mains out there, do you think there's a chance she can find her spot in the meta again? I'd love to hear what you have to say. For now, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my previous Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But until next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.